shortly. Once again, welcome everybody to our webinar. I'm seeing a few more people arriving, so we're going to give it another 1 more minute and we're going to get started. Thank you very much.
I'm good.
Okay, let's get started. Welcome everybody to our Symphony Corporation webinar on care and feeding of your PeopleSoft environment. We're going to spend about 30-35 minutes talking about the back end and maintenance and tuning and kind of the ongoing care and feeding of to keep your PeopleSoft running as smoothly as possible, and some things that you may not have thought about and some tips that we can give you right now to look at. I'm Dan Donchik. On with me is Harry Mitlitsky, and actually, let me pull up the agenda. Oops. We're going to talk about who is Symphony, what does Symphony have to offer, and then we're going to break down. We're going to talk about managing your day-to-day performance, monitoring and optimizing your production infrastructure, optimizing your application, optimizing your database, talking about how we recommend applying patches and what strategies that may exist, and then talk about your support and security strategy. If you have questions, please type them into the webinar window, and we will get to those at the end of the webinar and go through and answer all your questions for you. So everybody's on mute. So we can't have this be interactive because it kills the flow, but it does allow us at the end to type your questions in. We'll go through and answer those. So I'm going to start by passing this to Harry, who will give you the first overview here.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Just a very brief introduction of who Symphony is, and then we'll get to the meat of the webinar. But Symphony was established in 1997, a leading provider of value-added technology and business process improvement services across industries, in particular healthcare. The main point I want to make on this particular slide is that they acquired JGI in July of last year, and JGI had many different practices, but one of the main ones was a PeopleSoft practice. So we were acquired again in July of last year, and our PeopleSoft practice, we've been doing PeopleSoft consulting for the last 8 years. My background really is doing PeopleSoft since 1991 and actually working for PeopleSoft at a time. Our PeopleSoft practice includes a full-service lab for upgrades and implementations. Most of our consultants in the PeopleSoft industry have over 9 years of experience, and we've done over 150 implementations and upgrades over the last 6 years. So we are an Oracle certified partner, and only one of 2 Accelerate partners in the country. Accelerate is a rapid implementation methodology that we had to get certified from Oracle to get that title. And we also have the ability to resell PeopleSoft to our small client base. And I'll turn it back over to Dan, who will get into the meat of the presentation.
Thanks, Harry. Just a few words about who I am. I actually run our lab and data center facility for Symphony up in Simsbury, Connecticut. We do all of our hosted implementations and upgrades out of this facility, as well as production hosting for PeopleSoft applications. And I've been doing this since 1993, and have been working with the software since version 3. So what we're going to talk about today is sort of what happens in your production environment day to day. How do you make sure that you're optimal in your deployment of your PeopleSoft, and how do you make things better, and what tools can you use to look at your performance. So the first point I make, PeopleSoft is a living application. You've got users that are in it every day adding data. You've got batch processes running every day. You've got growing databases. You've got processes that may be failing. You've got processes that may be running slowly. It requires more than just leaving it up and running it. So how do you optimize the daily functions? Well, how many of you out there are at the end of the phone when the user calls and says it's slow? So how do you optimize that user experience? That probably can save you the money. If you can figure out how to make it so a user doesn't complain that something's slow, or you can explain it to them, that makes your life a lot easier. Sometimes that's the most difficult question to ask because of all the pieces that are involved in the application. How do you optimize your batch processing? How do you make sure that processes that are being run during the day don't impact processes online processes? What do you move to a nightly batch window? How do you optimize your web throughput? These are just a couple of things that you need to be sensitive to when you're running your PeopleSoft application. I put Sparky on this page on purpose for all of you who remember kicking the dog. I think that's very relevant to this conversation because you've got people out there that are kicking the dog on the web pages and trying to optimize their performance. And those of you who know who Sparky is, you've been doing this for a long time. First step in optimizing your deployment is to understand what is the best infrastructure for your production environment. PeopleSoft is multi-tiered. Doesn't mean you have to run it multi-tiered, but it is recommended typically that you separate out your tiers. There's the website, the web page, the web software. There's the application server layer. There's the batch processing layer, and then there's the database layer. Are you using the right infrastructure? Can virtualization help you? How do you optimize through virtualization availability and response time? So we have a couple of recommendations around this. We recommend in production environments, regardless of size, that you look at load balancing your web servers. That way, you always have availability from a web server standpoint for your users. If you lose one, it goes over to the other. If you have a high load for the day, say your payroll, the day your payroll runs and people are coming in to look at their paychecks, you have a high load, you have enough to absorb that. You want to distribute your architecture on multiple application servers as well. That gives you a number of benefits, notwithstanding the fact that if you have to take one down for maintenance to clear a cache that something's failing, all users will move over to another one. It provides a nice level of high availability. So that, in combination with the web servers, gives you the ability to say that you have a high availability environment without a lot of effort. We also recommend multiple process schedulers to distribute reporting processes during the day among the app servers, or among servers. I'm careful with this one because I'll encounter environments all the time that have 5 or 6 process schedulers, which is overkill. We recommend, especially, and those of you who are running in Unix environments already have this. You have a Unix process scheduler as well as an NT process scheduler, and the master scheduler will distribute that load. We recommend 2. Going beyond 2 becomes overkill and becomes a lot more difficult to maintain. So those of you in Unix environments, you're already doing this. Those of you in NT environments, we recommend that you put your process schedulers on your app servers, as many as you have. typically 2 is still enough, even if you have more than 2 app servers. I built a little picture to show what I'm talking about here. The idea being that you have a front-end load balancer, which would typically be a hardware device. We have done it with software. We have done it with a different server. We have done it with WebLogic load balancing. It seems to work best if you use a true load balancer, a Cisco device. I think I've got clients that are using Barracuda that will relay the web requests off to multiple web servers so that you can distribute the processing. The next layer is application servers. This picture shows 3 of them. You can have 2 of them. I would certainly in a production environment you should have more than 1. And on each of these application servers we put a process scheduler as well. I think 2 is fine. Sometimes 3 works, but that certainly gives you some flexibility. And then you notice on the database end of this we only have 1 server. There's a lot of talk around clustering, rack for Oracle in terms of database. That's not about performance, that's about availability, and that's about disaster recovery. And the reality at that level, at that layer, and there's nothing wrong with it, but keep in mind that the more in an Oracle rack situation, which is their distributed database architecture where you can have multiple database servers, that actually does that you can get a hit to your performance adding multiple database servers as opposed to an enhancement, and that's true of a clustered Microsoft environment too. We actually shy away from that in our world. We tend to move towards replication actually at all levels to provide high availability. This distributed infrastructure is about performance, not necessarily availability. And that brings me kind of to the notion of virtualization. Everybody out there has now engaged in or is looking at moving to virtual servers. You buy your servers from Dell or IBM or wherever, and you're buying servers that have 4 core processors and 64 gigs of RAM, and they're these very, very large processing servers, and they're really meant to run virtualization software like VMware, hypervisor, any hypervisor. There are a number of products out there. We in our hosting center are using VMware. What that allows you to do is very easily distribute your app servers among virtual servers. So you buy one big massive box, physical piece of hardware, you can have 6 servers on that, just on that piece of hardware, from the database through the app servers to the web servers, and they're all individual virtual machines. The other benefit that gives you is the availability of software that will allow you to do replication of those virtual machines to another physical piece of hardware, either in the same data center or in another data center. And we're doing it in various different ways. When we deploy a hosted customer in our Symphony hosting center, we deploy on virtual machines with a real-time replication on a second piece of hardware and a second piece of disk. So we maintain our high availability. If one goes down, the other one takes over. So this is what we're recommending across the board at this point. So we're addressing high availability and we're addressing performance, all with this type of an architecture. So let's if we dig a little deeper into this, and talk about optimizing the application itself as opposed to just the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is one piece. You want to make sure you're on an optimal infrastructure. But if your application isn't tuned properly, it doesn't matter what you do. This is particularly true in a Windows environment. You're on a 64-bit infrastructure, and you have a 64-bit operating system, but your Tuxedo is still running at 32-bit. So you need to optimize the processes around Tuxedo, keeping in mind that you may not have all the access or all the performance benefit of a 64-bit. If you're deployed in a Linux or a Unix environment, still can do that on a virtual machine. A virtualization, you do have the full benefit of 64-bit, and you can optimize around that as well. The other piece of this is making sure that you're optimized in your memory allocation at each level. And here's the big tip I'm going to give you today, for free in this webinar. The first thing that everybody should go back and do is take a look at their web server memory allocation and their WebLogic. Assuming you're running WebLogic, almost everybody is. The WebLogic, when you deploy from the PIA installer and you start it up, it puts in a default memory, Java memory heap allocation of 512 megabytes. Maybe it puts in a gig. Well, you're putting it on a server that probably has 4 gigs in it. 512 megabytes as a Java heap is not nearly big enough. And it's 75% of the time you have users call in and say they either are getting a page that's hanging with the processing, or they're not able to get into the application, or it's incredibly slow to respond. It's because you do not have enough memory on your Java heap on your WebLogic. So I would go back and check that. It's in the setm.cmd file in Windows, and there's a similar file in Unix, and it's on the Java command line. There's a max-min Java heap size setting for WebLogic, and that needs to be at least 2 gigs. You should allow it to expand up to 3 or 4, depending on how much RAM is in the server that you're using. So go back and take a look at that one. And if you've taken nothing away from this, at least you've got a little bit of concrete information. But in that vein, we're also looking at the SQL layer. We're looking at the Tuxedo layer, and a lot of people don't look at this at all, and what the specific application server processes are that you are running. We'll look at a page on Tuxedo tuning and semaphore allocation in a second, but I want to go through quickly what the different application server processes you are actually running on your server do and what they are, and understanding, and this is just a subset, there are far more than these, but these are the major processes. And understanding what each of these server processes actually do is key to making sure that you're optimal in your deployment. And also running things that not running things you don't need. Because when you go in and you configure your application server, you pick one of the templates, the developer, the small, the medium, the large, and they, by default, will turn on processes you don't need and won't have enough processes of the ones you do need. So looking at this page, you want to be sensitive to your PS app serve process. That's your main application server process. And what we recommend from a sizing perspective is there should be 5 to 7 instances of these running for every 100 users you have connected to the system. And what will happen is if you set the settings properly, they'll spawn additional servers when they need to, and they'll recycle when they're done. Once again, you've got to make sure you have enough memory on your box, and that's the next page to handle this, but that's kind of the overall recommendation. The second one you'll see is PS query serve. That is very similar to the PS app serve process. It's meant to handle larger queries, offload those queries from PS app serve. You decide how many of these you need running based on how many users you have running queries, large queries with the query tool during the day. There are customers, there are deployments that don't allow users to have access to query at all. That's more few and far between these days, but that's how you evaluate this one. The next process that you see is the PS quick serve. That's really a process that's spawned or is supposed to be spawned when there's a quick SQL request given to the application server. A lookup on a prompt table. A quick validation. Those spawn quick serve processes and then offload the main PS app serve processes. We recommend, once again, on that one that you do run this, that you run 3 to 5 of them for every 100 users that you have connected to your system. And when I say 100 users, it's not how many users in your overall organization. It's really how many concurrent users you have at any given moment. So you don't need to have a lot of these, but if you're an organization that's got 2,000 concurrent users in payroll, you're going to want to have a number of these instances available. And once again, you're going to want to have multiple application servers that will share the load. The next few processes all are around the integration broker, the publish and subscribe services. You need these if you are running anything with the integration broker, including the report repository and the report monitor. If you run Envision and it goes to the report manager, you need to be running the pub and sub services to handle that. If you are doing a lot of integration, a lot of SOAP services, a lot of external integration using the integration broker and the messaging, you need to have a number of these processes running, both pub and sub. So you've got the PS pub HND, that's the handler. The pub DSP, that's the dispatcher. They work in concert, and the same is true on the subscription handler and the subscription dispatch. So the message comes in through these services and through your integration broker. The next one on this list, the PS RenServe, this is the one when I give this presentation at user group meetings, I have everybody raise their hand if they know what this is. And it's interesting. It's, usually I get about half the room that knows what it is. What this is the real-time event notification server. What this does for you is it allows your users to run their reports to a window, real-time. So what happens, for those of you who aren't using this, what happens is they click, say there's a crystal report that they run or a PO or something. They say run to window as opposed to run to web, and the back end schedules the report in the process scheduler, and then you get a window that pops up that shows you the status of that report queued processing, and then once the report is complete, the output of the report comes into that window. That's what the REN server does. That's a for those of you who aren't using it, that's a very big crowd pleaser in a lot of organizations, and it's something that's very easy to turn on and get running. So I recommend you take a look at that one as well. And then the last one I have on this list, and this is not, by no means is this a comprehensive list, it's just a flavor, but this is a process, the PS Analytics server process. If you are running this and you don't need, I'll put it a different way, you know if you need to run this. If you are running enterprise or supply planning or some analytic, there are some other analytic processes, but when you configured your system or implemented your system, it was very clear you needed to run this analytics serve process. Most people are running it only because it's turned on by default. It's taking up memory space. It's taking up semaphores. If you don't need it, turn it off. So we talk about semaphores and tuning. This is a Windows Tuxedo control panel. This exists in Unix as well. A little different of a view, but most people don't know this exists. And for the most part, you shouldn't really touch this. But knowing what it is and knowing it's there can help you, especially in a Windows environment that's 32-bit that you're trying to kind of optimize on a 64-bit operating system. What this allows you to do is change the number of message queues that are available, the number of allowed processes that can run under Tuxedo. So I think the best example of this is there are people who on a development demo test stack will be running multiple application servers all on the same box. And you may have hit the point where it says it can't start anymore. If you adjust the message queues parameter here and the number of semaphores and the number of IPC segments, you can theoretically bring up more application server processes. So if you're in a position where you need to have more than the system will allow you, this is where you would tweak some of these parameters, and you can tweak them to allow for more memory to be used for each process. So once again, this is not for the light of heart. It's something that should be looked at sparingly, but it's something that does play into the whole optimization of your environment. We move to this is the database layer from a tuning perspective is probably where you get your most benefit, because that's where you can see, if you've got people who are running batch processes who say they're running slowly, or online queries are running slowly, or there's poor response from a page, odds are you're going to see there's some impact at the database level. This is a screenshot of the Oracle Enterprise Manager that is installed with the Oracle database. SQL, and the next slide will show you the SQL equivalent. This is the tool that shows you what's going on from the back end. And if you can see from this page, all the green that's on here, that's not good. What that's showing us is that we've got an app engine process that's running the CPU, beyond its its maximum, and odds are I'm seeing really, really poor performance overall. So if you've got one poorly performing query or two poorly performing query, that's going to leach out throughout your entire system, and it's going to affect everything that's running. So you might have a user that says, well, I can't get into this page. I've always been able to get there. You go in the back end, you see that somebody's running an app engine they shouldn't be running. But this would be why anybody has a problem with what their performance would be because of these other processes that are running wild on the CPU. So the message here is, use your tools. Make sure everything's working. This is the SQL Management Console. It's very similar. It doesn't give you quite as much information as the Oracle one, but it's the same idea. It gives you, what's running, what's on the processor, what's happening throughout. We'll spend a little time here, a couple minutes, talking about patching strategy. We've gone through sort of philosophically, I've gone a number of ways around what you should do with your application patching, over time. We used to say you should only do application patching if you have an error and you need to fix it, and they come out with a patch for it. Over time, we've discovered that that really doesn't cover it, because the first thing that Oracle Support says to you is, well, what's your bundle level and what's your maintenance pack level? So what we're recommending now is an approach where we're taking, doing twice a year, doing a maintenance pack strategy. So Oracle comes out with a bundle every month for every application. They come out with a maintenance pack every month, or every quarter, that's a bundle of bundles. That's the easiest thing to apply. So we say, our recommendation typically is twice a year, engage in a maintenance pack strategy, apply the 2 most recent maintenance packs to your system, do your testing all at once, and be done with it. That way, if you hit a new bug, you're as close to being current as possible, and Oracle's more likely to give you the fix you need to solve your problem. PeopleTools patching is kind of the same idea. It's an easier process. That's the dot patch. So if you're on 8.5.1, it's the dot 15 or 16 after that. Our recommendation on that is to do that at the same time you do your maintenance packs, do the most recent tools patch, and then beyond that, if you need to do it on an off time, it's because you've hit a specific bug. But that's, once again, much easier to address. We'll talk a little bit about security and website security, and actually I have this slide kind of to promote our next webinar, which we'll talk about a self-service security solution that we've come up with. But the point here is the idea that if you open your application to the internet for self-service, and you do it with just a PeopleSoft web page, just a PeopleSoft login, all you're doing, you're giving the same page that you have inside to people outside. So if somebody can hack your user ID and your PeopleSoft user ID and password, they're into your system, and you may be putting data outside that you don't want to put there. So the point here is to be aware of how you're deploying your application on the outside, how your self-service is secure. Once again, I said we've come up with a solution to secure your self-service application. If you're interested in that, look for our webinar on it. I think we're going to do it next week. But it's just something to keep in the back of your head in terms of securing your PeopleSoft application and making sure that everything is working properly and that your sensitive data is secure, truly secure. And then just a final notion about support strategies and what kind of staff you need to really support your application properly. You need a DBA, you need a system administrator, you need somebody to handle your hardware and infrastructure, and your functional experts. All of you on this call probably know that, but the issue here is maximizing that expertise, because you don't need a full-time DBA for PeopleSoft. You don't need a full-time PeopleSoft administrator, but finding the person that has the skills for both may not necessarily be possible. Some of your organizations are sort of Sarbanes-Oxley regulated, where they say that your developers can't be your system administrators, so there's got to be a division of effort there. The notion here is that you want to make sure your staff is correctly sized and you're maximizing your expertise, and that you're leveraging, the possibility that you want to leverage external support to save in cost and save in the effort of finding, the people that have the expertise that you need. So, that's something that we're putting in your head is, how do you leverage external support to maximize and optimize your support mechanism for your system. So that's really pretty much what we have today in terms of an overview of the care and feeding. If you have questions, please put them into the box, and we'll take a look and answer them. And Harry, if you want to read the questions to me, that would be good.
At this point, I don't see any questions, Dan.
Okay. Oh, what? We've got a question. Let's see. What's your recommendation for log files? That's a good question. You know, the log files, depending on what level of tracing you have on your system, you should be careful about how much tracing you have. The log file directories can fill up pretty quickly, and I think the key is to just keep an eye on your disk space. You don't need to retain logs for more than a week, but that's typically a manual process. We have built scripts that will go and clean things out, but you know, they're not. You don't need to keep things around more than, you know, 5 or 6 days in terms of that. But you know, the biggest impact of a log file is that it can kill your disk space pretty fast, and the last, you know, your PeopleSoft application will come to a screaming halt if you don't have any disk space. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much once again. Appreciate your attention to this. If you have any questions that go beyond this, or want some recommendations or an overview of your infrastructure, an evaluation of your infrastructure or your deployment, contact Harry. His number is up on the screen, and then we look forward to having you join us for our webinar on self-service security and external deployment. I believe, Harry, next week.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Next Wednesday at the same time.
Next Wednesday at the same time.
Thank you, everybody.